Good evening, everyone. This is a little unconventional. My name is Mary Remig. I'm Deputy Clerk. Tonight I am opening our meeting and we're going to call to order at 6:34. In the absence of our mayor and deputy mayor, we just according to the procedural, we do need to assign a deputy mayor for the meeting on August 14th, 2024. Councillor Strackergen has offered to chair the meeting. If there is no disagreement, if I could get a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor O'Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Wilson. Go ahead and take it away, Councillor Strackergen.
Thank you very much, Mary. Good evening, everyone. This is my first time in the mayor's hot seat, so bear with me, but Mary and Amy, who's also acting for the CAO, will, I'm sure, keep me in line. So we'll start this evening off with the land acknowledgement, and I believe Councillor Wilson will be reading that.
The municipality of North Granville acknowledges that the municipality operates on the territory of the Anishinaabe. We recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who now call North Granville their home. We respect and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship, and we commit to Indigenous informed decision-making to foster the path towards reconciliation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. And next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. We have before us, if there are any concerns, please raise them. Otherwise, I'm looking for a mover and seconder for tonight's agenda. Moved by Councillor Sullivan and seconded by Councillor Wilson. All in favor? And that's approved. We have an agenda. Do we have any disclosures of interest for this evening? Not seeing any. The next item on tonight's list is the presentation and delegations. And tonight we have a few folks in the audience here to talk about Overdose Awareness Day. So please come up. I believe Isabella. All right. You'll be speaking tonight. And I think you have Darlene and Sherry here with you this evening. So, and of course, Mr. Baker. And just there should be the one with the people on it for the microphone in front of you to turn that on so we can hear you. Just press the button with the little person. There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. So my name is Isabella. I work with addictions and mental health. My role is a case manager there. I kind of do a little bit of everything. I do a little bit of addictions counseling, a lot of community outreach with the homeless population. And whatnot. So today we're just talking about Overdose Awareness Day and kind of the importance behind that and what that means. And it's important to remember those that we've lost due to overdose and acknowledge the grief and the grief of the family and friends left behind. It helps us renew our commitment to end overdose related harms and break the stigma. So the overdoses have tripled in the past few years, as you guys probably know. We now have 10,024 deaths between 2023 and 2024 in Ontario. I believe we're going to touch a little bit more on stats here for the next presenter. So that actually surpasses car accidents and homicides for the last year in Ontario, which is insane. So overdoses can affect anyone, as you all know. It can be, it's not your stereotypical person struggling with homelessness. Sometimes it is, but it's important to know where those people start. They could be your sister, your mother, your partner, a friend, anyone. From people from all walks of the world that grew up in a good family that, maybe had a traumatic episode in their life, grief, got into hanging out with the wrong crowd. It could be anything. And that is their coping mechanism. And eventually it gets to the point where they're no longer functioning, which we call like a functioning user or substance user or alcohol for someone who's using alcohol. That being said, it gets to the point where they're no longer able to cope. And, that's where the homelessness comes into effect, which homelessness is running, it's an epidemic. It's running rampant in Brockville. And I've even from someone who's half grown up in Kempville, half grown up in Brockville, I've even seen some in Kempville, and it's sad that that's the reality now, that there are, you know, homeless people that are struggling with substance use in our rural areas. So I'll touch a little bit on opioids, because opioids is so big right now with the overdoses. Of course, you can overdose from other things, but that is one of the most problematic substances right now. So the difference between, you know, a street opioid and a prescription opioid is when people, you know, they have a surgery, their doctor prescribes them an opioid. It's a painkiller. So it could be to prescribe fentanyl, oxycodone, hydromorphone, morphine, anything like that. And the person is using that for pain, and it turns into an addiction. They no longer can get that from their healthcare provider. So they then turn to, you know, the street version. And unfortunately, there's no way to know what's in that. It's not only just people who are getting prescriptions. Sometimes they start and they work their way up to those substances. That being said, these dealers will then cut the substance with fentanyl. Usually, they can cut it with whatever they want. But you know, 1 grain of sand or a grain of salt size of fentanyl can make someone overdose. So that's how easy it is. You never know how much you're getting. So these individuals are using this substance and, you know, having accidental deaths or overdose from these substances. So is everyone familiar with naloxone or Narcan? Does everyone know what that is? Yeah, I have a little kit in front of some of you there. Just briefly, so everyone knows, if someone's overdosing, does anyone know what it looks like? What some of the signs and symptoms are of an overdose? Anyone know? I'm opening it to questions, or no? So, what's that, sorry?
Depressed breathing, depressed level of consciousness.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, someone who has labored breathing, they're not breathing at all. They, maybe they don't have a pulse, obvious. They could be white, ghostly looking, blue in the lips, blue in the nails, which means there's no blood flow, that sort of thing. So what you would do in that situation is you would immediately call 911. You would pull out your naloxone or Narcan kit, and you would administer, if the nasal one, there's nasal and there's the ones that you inject. So you can do the injecting ones, you do them in the leg or the arm, and the nasal you push up into the nose, and you eat one dose. So you push it up and you do it every 3 minutes until paramedics arrive while you're in complement to CPR, okay? So that's how they are used. I just wanted to touch on that because I feel like it's important that everyone kind of knows how to use them. I know it's kind of foreign to some people. It was for me when I first learned about them. And then briefly, we are, our agency, I'm part of the day and evening treatment program. So we run groups for individuals struggling with substance use. We run an anger management group, substance use 101, a smart recovery group, anxiety and depression, every group you could pretty much imagine. We run a family dynamics group. So that being said, because of the need in the rural communities, we are opening groups in Kempville, Prescott, Smith Falls, and Gananoque. So actually, I will be the one running the group on Fridays in Kempville. So we're trying to get awareness out. I'll be running a smart recovery group and a substance use 101 group at our addictions and mental health office in Kempville, which is right across from the hospital in the DynaCare office, just right in there, just to, you know, better help our community members that might need that extra support when they're using an inactive addiction. So smart recovery is very similar to like an AA meeting. It's just a support group for individuals that want to talk about their substance use. You know, AA, they talk a lot about religion. We try to keep that out of it. We just want people to come, we meet them where they're at. Some are still actively using, some are abstaining from substance use. So this group is a non-judgmental group where we kind of have topics every week that we cover, we discuss, and kind of work through some of those substance use problems. Yeah, I think that covers it for me. Thank you for your time, guys.
I think we'll probably save all our questions for the end. I think there's a lot from that presentation. Thank you very much, Isabella. Yeah. Thank you.
You're so high in that chair. Thanks for having us today, everyone. And thank you, Isabella. I invited Isabella because when I first reached out about this, I wear a Beth Donovan hospice hat. This is not really our lane, but it is when we come to how it affects families in grief. So do you mind flipping the slide for me? So the objectives of International Overdose Awareness Day say that it's about raising awareness of overdose and prevention, reducing stigma around drug-related deaths, and acknowledging the grief felt by families and friends. So when I reached out and asked if you guys would be so kind to put a purple chair outside and let us put purple chairs throughout the municipality as a sign, you said, please come and tell us why this is important. So I reached out to the health unit and they provided me with a link that is available in real time on the website that shows the overdoses that are being reported in Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark. So these statistics are for up until July 31st of this year. And so far there has been 46 reported deaths from overdose in Lanark, Leeds, and Grenville. I asked if they had just Leeds and Grenville, and they don't. It encompasses all of it. But one of the things that David from the health unit said is that he wanted us to be aware that it's a self-reporting system right now. So this does not encompass everyone who's lost their life through overdose in our community. This is when it's actually getting reported to this tool. So I thought that that was kind of surprising and a fairly large number for our community. And that means that there's families and friends and loved ones that are left behind through this. I also included this one mostly because even I, as I looked at this, was surprised to see that it affects all age groups. You know, I guess even I had a preconceived notion that this was something that happened more with youth or, you know, that it wasn't predominantly men or women or whatnot. But you can see from this that it affects everybody in our community, regardless of age. More. So around the world, how people kind of acknowledge International Overdose Awareness Day is they hold memorial events, which is what Beth Donovan Hospice is doing at the end of the month. They do something called a Purple Chair campaign, which is a really beautiful visual way of recognizing that there is somebody missing from your dinner table. That's what it's supposed to represent. And when I kind of started to put the word out to our community and our community partners, I was like, hey, everybody, do you want to paint a purple chair and put it outside for me? I got a really lovely email back from someone who said, it's really funny that I opened this email today. I lost my child not very long ago to this, and I really appreciate that something is happening in our community to recognize that. So there is a stigma associated with loss through overdose and addiction. And we're hoping that as a community, we can kind of break that barrier a little bit and show some compassion for those who have experienced these types of losses. Let me turn it one more time, you'll see. So we've invited people to bring their purple chairs to our event. You know, I kind of hope that if we move forward with this as a community, we can do it in a more central location like Riverside Park and be really able to show up for those that have experienced this type of loss.
Thank you very much, Darlene. Welcome, Sherry.
Hello, everyone. I will keep this very short and sweet because they've pretty much covered everything, but basically I'm with Victim Services, Leeds and Grenville. More specifically, I'm the North Grenville Community Coordinator. And I just wanted to say that as a victim service responder, we do respond to the sudden deaths. So we get a firsthand look in the instances of overdose, just how complex the grieving process is for the family that's left behind. There are lots of regrets, anger, resentments, what ifs. And the most noticeable thing about loss to overdose is the stigma that is associated with it. So, you know, someone loses a child to cancer, neighbors bring over a casserole. Someone loses a child to overdose, the reaction is very different. Not specifically because the care isn't there, but maybe just the not knowing what to do in that instance. So we very much appreciate you listening to us this evening, and we're hoping that by bringing awareness to this day, that we can open the conversations and prevent overdose deaths by being aware of the signs, knowing how to respond, removing stigma, very important, and ensuring that help is visible and accessible. So it's very lovely to hear that mental health addictions will be here on Fridays. I'm hopeful that people will be using that service. And I just want to end with just noting that when we treat others with respect and honor their dignity, we are supporting them in treating themselves with the same kindness and care. So thank you very much for listening to us. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Rick Baker, for those that don't know me. I've been very much involved in the last couple of months working with the hospice on developing what's called a compassionate community. What you've heard tonight is so important in terms of understanding the services and resources that are available in our municipality. And on September the 14th, right here in Town Hall, we'll be having what's called the Community Resource Day. And at that point in time, we're bringing forward what we consider a very, very important component, which is called the Community Charter, or Compassionate Community Charter, which will give very clear indication to our residents in this community about the services that are available. Even more important, there is going to be a community fair that day, and we're hoping to have between 25 to 35 different exhibitors showcasing the different resources that are available to our residents in town. So it's been really an exciting venture. Certainly thank Councillor Wilson for attending some of our meetings. And with her support, and we've met with the mayor a couple times as well, just to get some clarity in terms of how we bring this all about. It is really a community-driven project, and we're really super excited about it. And to have, representatives that here tonight to talk a little bit about their function, we'll see a lot more of that on the 14th. So hopefully we'll see everybody then. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. There's a lot in this presentation, but I think it's very important information to pass along to the community. And I think right now I'll turn to Councillor Wilson and Councillor O'Sullivan to see if they have any questions for you, any comments. I have a couple of my own.
Just thank you very much for being here, and thank you for doing what you're doing. We actually, in my family, have had a loss due to overdose in April of this year, and it is very traumatic, and it can happen to any family. So I really appreciate what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, did you want to add anything? So thank you all very much. I had many years ago now, I was at the emergency room. I was in the ER at KDH, waiting to get in for who knows what with one of my kids. And at the same time, a young man, really a teenager, died of an overdose. And the whole scene unfolded with his family coming in, people realizing what had happened, and the level of grief was something beyond just a death, right? There was so much more to that, as Sherry mentioned, and it is definitely stuck with me. And I think the importance of knowing, that we have naloxone kits available, and where Councillor O'Sullivan has championed that to get that into the forefront here in the community as well. So I think all of this is very important. Hopefully we have the information for the sessions that are available on Friday evenings. Yeah, perfect. So we'll make sure that that information is shared with the community as well, so that knowing that there is help is part of the whole process. So thank you very much. Victim Services, I'm very much aware of the stats that come out. I'm part of that board as well, and we talk a lot about all of this and where things are headed. Where council will be participating at the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, the AMO conference. And one of the topics that has come up is talking about homelessness and opioids and asking for the province to step up and provide more supports and more resources for communities and municipalities to be able to even tackle this on their own, because it's certainly much bigger than any one municipality. So they're trying to get folks together as well and continue that conversation. So hopefully that will get some more traction as well. Okay, thank you very much. It was very much appreciated. Thank you all for being here. So because the presentations here were to talk about Overdose Awareness Day, we do want to recognize this, and I'll read the statement that we have before us. Whereas International Overdose Awareness Day is a day in support of those affected by the toxic drug crisis with the purpose of remembering loved ones lost to overdose, the drug toxicity crisis, and ending the stigma of drug-related deaths. And whereas the Corporation of the Municipality of North Grenville acknowledges the harm and hardship caused by drug overdose and the drug toxicity crisis. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Corporation of the Municipality of North Grenville proclaim August 31st, 2024 as International Overdose Awareness Day in North Grenville. Looking for a mover and seconder on that. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor O'Sullivan, and all in favor. There we go. Thank you. Thank you all. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. We have a number of items on here. Previous minutes, Oxford Village Park Lot control exemption, advisory committee meeting minutes, the RVCA 2023 annual report, municipal funding agreement, concession road, Habitat for Humanity plan of condominium, and noise exemption request. Are any of those items that we wish to pull from the consent agenda? Seeing none, okay, so we'll look to move on to the next one. Don't need to do anything with that. We need to mover and seconder for the items on the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor O'Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Wilson, and all in favor. Good. Okay. And that's going to be the public meeting, correct? Sorry, we've got quite a few items on here that I have to skip over. Just one moment, please. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is ZBA 0924 housekeeping, a general amendment. It is a public meeting, so I do have a statement that needs to be read as we move into this public meeting. Council will now hold a public meeting to consider a municipal-wide application to make a series of general changes to comprehensive zoning bylaw 50-12. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If an appellant does not provide oral submissions at this public meeting or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendment, the Ontario Land Tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Any persons who wish further notice of the council's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to the planner following adjournment of this public meeting. Are there any people here for this public meeting? We do not have anyone online, do we? No, okay. So no one in the audience or online. We'll now pass this meeting over to Deputy Director Phil Mosier.
Thank you, Deputy Director Streckeryan. So this is a matter that an interim report was given to Council in December of 2023 to talk about some of the ideas. And this follows out of a notice of motion that was brought forth by Deputy Mayor Barkley in April of last year to identify unnecessary hurdles to residential infill and intensification within North Grenville zoning standards. including but not limited to things like density, parking, and lot coverage, and then to prepare a report with recommendations on improved standards that support residential infill and intensification. So an interim report was prepared in December. We had hoped at that time that we would have a bit more information in terms of final stormwater management report, the comprehensive one that spoke to all parts of the municipality, but we don't have that yet. However, it's interesting that the notice of motion kind of coincided with our application to CMHC for the Housing Accelerator Fund, whereby we said we would look to make some changes to the zoning bylaw to facilitate more infill and intensification. So this is kind of, if you could think about it like a two-staged approach, where we are bringing a series of measures forward tonight, which we think could be adopted by council, which would improve, reduce barriers to infill and intensification housing. And then when we get more information from stormwater, as well as I got a couple comments from the deputy mayor about other things to look at that he just didn't think were quite included in the report and draft bylaw tonight, we'll bring forward a subsequent housekeeping amendment at that time. I guess at a very high level, we're looking at potentially doing updates to the definition of agriculture, which would include farm accommodation as a right within the zone bylaw itself. Like presently, if you wanted to have a temporary farm worker, you can have some houses, you can have some accessory houses, but it's not permitted as of right. So we're looking to just change that definition so that if somebody's a farmer and needs that they can go ahead and do that without having to come back to council for a zoning bylaw amendment. Another thing we're looking at is, if we could actually just go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, we have looked at the provincial policy statement as well as North Grenville's official plan and the county's official plans, the strategic plan, the comprehensive zoning bylaw. Several readings have been taken. So that's all detailed in the written report. I'm not going to spend too much time on that tonight. Next, please. Yeah, we'll go to the next slide. This is quite wordy. Okay, so we'll just jump right into what the changes are. So right now, if somebody wants to have a garden suite, this is a type of dwelling that it's a bit of a holdover from a different time when the Planning Act was passed, where if somebody needed to have a garden suite for a relative to live at their property, they could do so. And it would mean that they'd have to enter into an agreement with the municipality, and it could be used as a garden suite for that person for a period of time not to exceed 20 years. Now, additional dwelling units are permitted as of right in almost every zone within North Grenville. And so there are still some garden suites where there's, an agreement, and it says once that person's no longer living there, it ceases to be garden suite, has to be removed from the site. So we're just proposing to add a change as staff that if it's ceased to be used for that proposed use and it's past the term of its agreement, that it can be converted into an accessory dwelling unit as long as it meets all of the zone standards. So they don't have to actually remove it from the property, it can stay. So that's one thing that we're proposing. If we could go to the next slide, please. Again, just talking about that agriculture definition. I attended a webinar, I think it was in the spring, about how a definition of agriculture has changed over time and how presently, if you include accommodation for farm workers within the definition, that's an advantageous way for farmers to self-select and self-identify if they need accommodations for farm work. And then if that's included within the definition, they don't have to come forward for a zone amendment or a variance. They can just get a building permit to do what they need to do. Yes, there's other permits that would be required, such as septic system permits or wells and things like that. But it would mean a farmer can look after that themselves. So next slide, please. One of the things we had hoped, again, was that we would have the stormwater information, that it would justify an increase in lot coverage across the board for all our residential and commercial zone categories within the urban area, but we just don't have the information yet. However, one thing that we're proposing as an interim measure is that if somebody wants to construct a additional residential unit, that we can waive lot coverage. So that is, if you can meet all zone requirements from a setback perspective, distances from neighbors, homes, etc., you could have that additional residential unit, and lot coverage would not apply to that specific structure. In town, especially, you would probably still need a lot grading and drainage plan just to demonstrate no negative impacts to neighbors, but this is seen as an interim solution until the time that we have that more fulsome information. That would allow people to do this and create this type of housing much quicker without having to ask for variance of lot coverage every time they wished for that dwelling to be constructed. Next slide, please. This one is really straightforward. Bill 23, when it came into effect, said that municipalities had to pass zoning bylaws that allowed up to 2 residential units within a dwelling. We in North Granville currently only allow 1 additional residential unit within the dwelling. The second has to be in a detached structure. But with the change from Bill 23, this means that if somebody wants to have 3 units, like a principal and 2 attached residential units in one building, they can. It would just mean that they can't have a 4th detached additional residential unit. So it's a minor change, but it's a provincial directive. You can have 3, you can have 2 and 1, you can have 3 and 0. And this is just to update and be more modern with the legislation that's come out. So this is what staff proposes. Next slide, please. We did run into a few situations where the wording in the zone bylaw today says that you are not permitted a second driveway for an additional residential unit. And so we had, I think, 2 instances in recent memory where folks did have an additional residential unit. For whatever reason, in their context, they required the second driveway. They were able to obtain an entrance permit for the second driveway, didn't violate any other zone standards. It met with the requirements for road superintendents from like a entrance policy perspective. And so we've found that at present, it became a bit of a barrier that if somebody can legally get a second driveway, they should be permitted to do so. And the stipulation that, well, you couldn't have the second driveway just for an additional unit seemed to be a bit of a hindrance. So what we are proposing is that if somebody wants to have the second driveway to service an additional unit and they meet all other zone standards, that they should be able to have that. So that's the proposed change there. They'd still have to obtain an entrance permit, have the road superintendent come out, do his check, all of that. Next slide, please. This one isn't necessarily in the vein of infill and intensification, but we did find that there was a bit of specificity or rigor around some kinds of home-based businesses. And what we found is that in a few instances, somebody might want to do something like a dog grooming business or something like that. Now, a hairdresser may have been a permitted home-based occupation, but a dog grooming business was not. And there wasn't sort of this flexibility built into the home-based business provisions that would say, you can do something that's like it or similar to it. So in those instances, someone would have to bring an interpretation question to the Committee of Adjustment and say, I'd like to do this thing. It's kind of like a hairdresser, but it's not. And it still satisfies all the other 9 performance criteria for your home-based business provisions. Like I'm the only employee, I'm not becoming a nuisance, it's not taking up more space than is allocated through the provisions. But it's just the fact that there's not any flexibility built into the language. So we are proposing some flexibility, adding wordings like where it's, you could have these types of uses such as, but not limited to. And then there could be some interpretation. And again, there's 9 performance criteria that have to be met for a home-based business in order for it to be established. And if something exceeds those standards, it's at that point in time that the business would have to be transferred to a new location because it's no longer compatible as a residential home-based business. Next slide, please. Wetland setbacks is something that we have found was a bit challenging in practice. The provincial policy statement says that development must maintain a 120-meter setback from wetlands. Now, you can still develop within that distance, but you have to be able to demonstrate that it doesn't have a negative impact on the wetland. Recently, the Conservation Authorities Acts were changed and the regulations were changed. And whereas the provincial policy statement very much still says development within 120 meters of a provincially significant wetland should be assessed, and there should be a demonstration of no negative impacts. We saw a windowing back of what the conservation authorities have been regulating to just that 30-meter setback. Our zone standards have been in place around this for about 10 years. There's also been some other changes to setbacks and when site plan control can be used adjacent to wetland. Recent changes by the province mean that a site plan control cannot be used in a residential context unless it's greater than 10 residential units or unless it is within 30 meters of the setback of a water course. So our zone standards as they're written today, they refer to the Conservation Authority as a clearing agency for environmental setbacks, where the Conservation Authority's mandate has now changed and they're focused only on natural hazards. So that is a nuance that's a little bit different. Our zone standards also require site plan control when development occurs within 120 meters of a wetland or 60 meters of a local wetland, which we can no longer do based on provincial changes. And then finally, we found that this standard became a bit onerous in that, let's say somebody wanted to do a garage or a small addition to their home, and they happened to be 70 or 80 meters from a wetland boundary. They were still having to go through this process that's outlined in our zone bylaw today. So staff proposes not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, to keep the zone standards and the performance criteria for setbacks to wetland, but to change that physical distance from 120 meters from a provincially significant wetland or 60 from a locally significant wetland to 30. And then that may require things like an EIS, and that may require limits on the type of development that occurs. And in speaking with our Conservation Authority counterparts, that's the critical area for wetlands, that 30 meters. And they did have a chance to review the proposed change, and they did not have an objection to this one. Next slide, please. One of the things that we have seen in recent time is that there's been a series of applications for multiple residential dwellings within our municipality. And the consistent thing that's been occurring with these is reductions in the amount of parking spaces. Generally, for a multi-apartment residential building, it's going from 1 space to 0.75 spaces. And the visitor space requirement is going from 1/4 spaces per unit to about 0.2. This has been consistent over probably the last 5 years. Going back a little further than that, we have seen that there's been reductions that have been supported for the number of parking spaces required for dwellings that are exclusively for the use of the elderly or dwellings that are more that nursing home style. So drawing upon the information that's been submitted by these traffic consultants in a general sense for multiple dwellings, as well as assisted living, elderly living, or nursing home style dwellings, staff is proposing some reductions for this type of land use. So from 1 space to 0.75 and 0.25 spaces to 0.2 spaces for visitors in a multi-apartment setting. And then from 0.75 spaces to 1/2 space per unit for a dwelling exclusively for use by the elderly, or 1 space for every 2 beds to 1 space for every 4 beds for a nursing home. This would free up some space for more units, more dwelling units to exist within the context. And we have been seeing with some transportation demand strategies lately that this is supportable. I think I just want to put a caveat in there to say that we're proposing all of these different types of solutions. There's a lot of categories here. But if council feels strongly about any one of them and that they think, no, that's not a good change or a great change to put in place now, you can remove it from the bylaw. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I know parking has been a contentious thing over the past years. Next slide, please. Currently, we don't have a standard for commercial driveways within the zone bylaw. We have a maximum for driveways and it's 9 meters. And we find that some commercial driveways require greater width than that. So they're forcing their driveways to the 9-meter standard because they don't want to go through an onerous variance process. We are just saying, let's specify that there's 2 different kinds of driveways in the zone bylaw. There's residential and they're still capped at 9 meters. between 3 and 9 meters. And then there's other things, performance criteria that limit how big they can be. And let's have commercial driveways that can be of a size that's suitable for the business and the type of business it will be. Next slide, please. We are proposing some reductions to interior side yards, rear yards, and lot frontages to reflect a more modern lot fabric within the R1 and R2 zones. These are single density, single detached and semi-detached zones. And this could apply in town and out of town. And if you are allowing these reductions in side yards and rear yards and front yards, it can allow for more building area to be constructed upon. For the interior side yards, what we propose is the reduction from 3 meters to 1.2 meters. The R1 already establishes that if it's a single detached dwelling, you can have 1.2 meters on either side if there's an attached garage. So we're not really changing much in that regard. And 1.2 meters is a common standard we're seeing in more recent developments where homes are a little bit closer together and people go down to that 1.2 meter because it's an OBC minimum requirement. We're also proposing that rear yards can go down to 6 meters. So buildings and structures can be as close as 6 meters. Presently, it's about 7.5. And again, this reflects a more consistent standard that's been seen over time with more recent developments. Same for the front yard. We do think that this has the potential to reduce infill and intensification variance applications over time. Next slide, please. I think this is maybe one of the most significant proposed changes. Previously in December, when we came to council, we said one thing that could occur would be a 2-zone residential system whereby you have singles and semis and townhouses within one zone category, which could be considered to be like a lower residential density zone. And then you could have multiples being in that higher residential density zone. It might be just a little bit too quick to do all of that. So instead, what staff is proposing is that we add a permitted use into the single detached zone. And that would mean that you can have a semi-detached dwelling or a duplex dwelling within the R1 zone. Presently, it's just limited to a single detached dwelling. This is following the same vein that council's made in other applications where they have said you can't have a single detached dwelling in those R4 multiple dwelling zone categories. So again, it's just trying to say, no, those are for more dense types of development. This is just the other side of that, saying if supported, you could have a few more denser forms within the R1 zone, and it allows people to self-select the style of home they want. So instead of just having a single detached, they could have a semi or a duplex within the R1. Next slide, please. Another thing that we've noticed frequently is that there's a maximum density provision within the R2 to R4 zone categories. And that says that you can have one dwelling unit for every 230 meters squared of area that you have. That works out to about like half a town lot. In practice, the official plan says that you can have density maximums up to 60 units per gross hectare, which is more consistent with the number 167 meters squared. So staff is proposing that this value of 230 be reduced to 167, which allows a bit more density within the R2 to R4 zones. This does not apply to additional residential units, which are permitted as of right. But if somebody wanted to do a townhouse dwelling or multiple apartment dwelling, this would be the number that sets the number of units within that area. Thank you. Next slide, please. That's the extent of it. I know that's a lot in there. There is a draft bylaw that's attached with it that lays it out in a bit more clear and plain language. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are some. I did want to also note that the deputy mayor had sent me an email earlier today, and he wanted me to read out those questions tonight because he's unable to be in attendance. His first question / suggestion was with regards to if 2 accessory dwelling units would be permitted in a primary dwelling, the suggested reduction in the parking ratio for multiple dwellings would have no real impact should a property owner want to add some units. So he was saying like, you know, if you had your primary dwelling, and then you had a visitor parking space, and then you had your additional dwelling units, you know, you'd probably need, by his math, 2.87 spaces. Okay, so you'd still need 3 spaces in the event that you had the 1 unit and the 2 accessory dwellings. So his suggestion or idea was that maybe there could be some pilot projects that exist in parts of the municipality where instead of 1 space required for an accessory dwelling unit, there's 0.5 spaces. His ideas that he proposed were the Rito Saunders Triangle and the Prescott Jack Street area. I did say to him, just because I had received this today, that I hadn't really had a good amount of time to look at that, but that if we're bringing back a second amending bylaw once we have information on stormwater, that could be a logical time to do more research to see if a reduction in parking for additional dwelling units is a good idea. So just kind of put a plug in that one. And then the other suggestion was, you know, he understood that we are experiencing a housing crisis in Canada. And his opinion was that the consideration of a 2-zone residential system would be too aggressive, given that we are in a housing crisis. So he appreciates the incremental approach of allowing semis and duplexes as of right within the R1 zone, but he thought it should maybe go a bit further. And he thought that in the R1 zone, there should be allowed to be 6 dwelling units, as long as it's no more than 2 stories. And I explained to him that it kind of does get there. If somebody is legally allowed to have a duplex or a semi in an R1 zone now, in theory, with the changes that we're making, they could have those 2 primary dwellings, so 2 halves of a semi, if you will. They could have a basement dwelling unit. There's the second one on each half, so that's 4. And then if they had a second story, separate dwelling unit, that would be 5 and 6 in that context. So again, you have to satisfy all zone standards and requirements to be able to do that. But I think his thought of let's have 6 plexes everywhere, for lack of a better word, is potentially able to be addressed by the proposed changes that staff introduces today. I think the only other thing I wanted to add is that, again, we did have conversation with the Conservation Authority about the wetlands, and they had no objection to that approach to reduce the setback to 30 meters. I know that's a lot. I'm happy to answer questions. I fully anticipate and expect them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Director Mosier. There's a lot of information here. There's clearly a lot of thought and work that's been put into this, and I appreciate that. I will turn to Councillor Wilson and Councillor O'Sullivan if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to raise. Yeah, Councillor O'Sullivan, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. And through you to Mr. Mosher. Yes, you're right, it's a lot, but I know it's important to do these housekeeping things so that we can reduce the red tape and unnecessary red tape for people who want to do some additional units or make some changes. I do have some concerns about the parking, and because I think when we have additional units coming on some of the existing Old Town Kemptville properties, which are large properties, but they're small streets. And so if people are going to end up having to park on the street, as well as increasing the lot coverage and then increasing the amount of parking, what's the overall effect on drainage if we've paved so much or put structures on so much? So those are the main concerns that I have, is making sure that the drainage is addressed properly. So that's, I mean, I think these are very comprehensive report that you provided, and those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Sullivan. I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to add to that, Deputy Director Mosier?
No, I think the thing to say is that we acknowledge that, especially in town, with some of this intensification being proposed, it could lead to situations where folks have to produce a lot grading and drainage plan, which demonstrates that they do not violate any existing drainage laws, and that they can tie into the system in a way that works. So we're not losing sight of that fact, I think. Yeah, I think honestly, this is stuff that it's not like pure science when it comes to planning and trying to get these things right. We are, I think, doing our best with the information that we have. The stormwater information will help with that, but we think even still, a property does have the ability to kind of develop and intensify at a greater density. And if doing so and preparing the lock rating and drainage plan, demonstrating no negative impacts, that provides the checks and balances that are needed to densify responsibly.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson, did you have any questions for the Deputy Director? No. Thank you. So I think that there's definitely a lot to consider and obviously more work to come on all of this. I will echo the concerns regarding that balance of infill parking spaces for these ARUs and so on, and the dwelling units and so on, and then also saying, well, maybe we can reduce further there, adding in driveways, which reduces the amount of parking space available potentially, and that balance. So I think that there's some lots of thought to be given to that. I will say though that I think the conversation around nursing homes and areas that are focused on seniors and so on, that discussion about reducing parking, I think is probably one that is well based in our experience here in the various spaces where we've seen that the need for parking is not likely as great in those circumstances. So parking is there's a lot to it. Okay, I don't see any other questions here from anybody. We don't have any members of the public here to speak to this. So if there are no further questions, we can entertain a motion. No other questions for now? Okay, so the motion is that council pass and enact bylaw 66-24 to make a series of general changes to comprehensive zoning bylaw 50-12. May I get a mover and seconder on this one, please? Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor O'Sullivan. And any last chance for any other comments? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to be sure that Deputy Mayor Barclay's questions have been addressed or can be addressed if we proceed with this tonight, that his concerns can be taken into account.
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, the Deputy Mayor Barclay was satisfied with the response I provided him in writing. He liked the idea of maybe a bit more study of a reduction, like a general reduction for additional residential units for parking spaces for future. And he was satisfied with the response about that if these changes are passed, that you can't have the number of units he had contemplated in his suggestions. So yes, I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I did get an email from him saying that sounds good. So
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wilson, go ahead.
Thank you. So you, Chair Strakian, to Deputy Director Mosher. These bylaws that we're passing tonight are written in stone for now, but they can be changed in the future to satisfy the changing dynamics of the future. Correct?
yes, through you, Deputy Mayor, that's correct.
Yeah. I'm just asking the question for the public. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if there are no other comments, then looking for a vote on this, all in favor? And we pass. Thank you very much. And this was a public meeting, so we will close this meeting and the resolution has already passed. So we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the 210 Van Buren draft plan of subdivision, the conditions. And who will be speaking to this? Okay, Director Martin.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Strahan. So we'll just go to the next slide. So tonight before council, staff are bringing forward recommended draft conditions for a plan of subdivision as it relates to 210 Van Buren Street. This matter has been before council before in regards to a zoning bylaw amendment where council passed the zoning bylaw amendment to permit the establishment of a 50-unit subdivision from a zoning perspective. So we did approve that amendment. We did receive an application for the plan of subdivision, which will create 4 residential blocks and 1 block for a private road. A variety of studies were submitted, including stormwater management, traffic impact study, civil drawings, and site servicing plan. Next slide, please. So municipal staff, as well as the counties, have reviewed the documents and comments have been provided back to the developer, which have been adequately addressed at this time. Or if there are items that were still outstanding, they've been identified as part of the draft conditions. The staff report provides the list of the draft conditions for council's consideration. And ultimately, it is the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville who are the approval authority for plans of subdivision. So when council passes recommendations for draft conditions, they do go to the United Counties who are the approval authority. Next slide, please. So this is just the layout of the subdivision. That's the draft plan. So the council has had the opportunity in the past through the zoning process to see a more detailed site plan, which showed location of the townhouse units. If council recalls, there is a play structure incorporated into the development. Again, it'll be private roads, private garbage collection, which is through earthen bins. So they'll be those are typically stored underground to help reduce the infiltration of pests. There is visitor parking incorporated into the site, and there are conditions in regards to ensuring that there is proper signage to ensure flow of traffic through the site, given that it is a private road. The private road will also be a fire lane, so we have to ensure that there won't be any obstruction of potential emergency vehicles within the development. Next slide, please. So it is staff's recommendation at this time that council support the proposed draft conditions as prepared by staff and that they be forwarded on to the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville for their consideration as part of the subdivision approval process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Martin. Any questions from Councillor Wilson? Councillor O'Sullivan, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to Director Martin. Thank you for the report and the that overview of the lot or the plan. It appears that it backs onto the rail trail. So with respect to active transportation, I wanted to know, is there a sidewalk that will lead to the crosswalk, which is on Van Buren at the rail trail, the pedestrian crossing? And is there connection to the rail trail for active transportation from this development? And what landscaping plans are in there with respect to trees and sidewalks within the subdivision development?
With you, Deputy Mayor Straker, and to Councillor Sullivan. So there would be connectivity out to Van Buren, but the proposal does not have the developer providing a sidewalk on the south side of Van Buren. There is a sidewalk on the north side. On the more detailed site plan that was included as part of the zoning, there is connectivity into the rail trail itself that'll be provided adjacent to where the play structure is. So there'll be a connectivity into there. So individuals from the development can access the rail trail up to the pedestrian crossing on Van Buren to cross over to the north side of the road.
Which is only maintained during the summertime, though. It's not maintained during the winter, that rail trail. So in order to get to the crosswalk, there's no sidewalk on the south side of Van Buren. So this would be rather isolated from even getting across to the north side where the sidewalk currently is. So I think I would like to see some kind of sidewalk put in place that gets the residents in this area safely to the crosswalk so that they can get over to the sidewalk.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sullivan. I see that Mayor Peckford has her hand up and she's joined us. So if you have any questions, Mayor Peckford, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And appreciate you stepping in for myself and the Deputy Mayor. I believe you've been deputized a Deputy Mayor to chair the meeting. Is that correct?
I have been. It's been causing
Okay,
great
good.
confusion, so.
No problem at all. So I apologize. My train, perhaps predictably in Canada was late. So as a consequence, I'm not there, but I appreciate the opportunity to ask a question virtually. I just wanted to follow up on the discussion in regards to pedestrian safety on Van Buren. I certainly actually have a strong recollection, I believe, of our planning meeting where we adopted the zoning provisions. And I know at the time, my understanding is, and I'm wondering if Ms. Martin or Mr. Mosher, through you, Chair, could recall a conversation through Public Works about potentially having the developer cost share in fact, a short sidewalk to get, those individuals living in that subdivision. This subdivision with 50 homes is being proposed as affordable, accessible, in town, walkable. And I do recall a conversation about a possible cost sharing for the purposes of a sidewalk on the south side. And I'm just wondering if our staff have any recollection in regards to that discussion, because it was certainly a big part of the public meeting, which I think happened nearly 2 years ago. I do have a second question, but through you, Chair, I'll wait until the first one is answered.
Director Martin?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Straughan, to Mayor Peckford. What I can recommend is that in regards to the recollection of that conversation, certainly there was discussion in regards to pedestrian connectivity within the area and just the limitations of having the sidewalk on the north side versus the south. At this time, there is no draft condition that relates to pursuing those conversations, but what I might recommend, if council is amenable, we could amend the resolution to direct staff to add in a draft condition that asks for the developer to review the pedestrian connectivity in regards to a sidewalk on the south side and pursue potential cost sharing to the satisfaction of the municipality.
If I might go ahead, Ms. Martin.
Yes, and the other item I want to add is that draft condition 13 does require adherence to the transportation impact study as satisfactorily amended or modified to our requirements as well. But just to provide a little more clarity and direction, we could modify potentially draft condition 13 to provide that opportunity to pursue those conversations.
Through you, Chair, I would be favorable to that should it meet with the blessing of council.
Okay, I think we'll draft some wording to that in the resolution for this evening, Mayor Peckford. And you had a second question, I believe.
I do. Thank you so much for your indulgence. My second question is in regards to the cash in lieu for parkland. I certainly am heartened to learn that I think some of that discussion that we had last time has led to the formal commitment to a play structure, given the fact that this is fairly significant residential intensification. And of course, even though we have a beautiful new park, not that far away, I think for the purposes of neighborhood building and community building, having that play structure within that particular development is valuable. I'm just curious to know what the implications are for a cash in lieu. Will there be particular requirements from the municipality in terms of the size of the play structure, in terms of the placement of the play structure moving forward? And is it necessary that we take up to 5% cash in lieu if resources are being expended on the establishment of sort of green/park space? Appreciate any clarification on that point.
Through Deputy Mayor to the Mayor. So what I can add in regards to our condition for cash and lieu is we provide a bit of a flexible draft condition, which allows us to take either land or the cash component. There is a play structure that is proposed, and the location was chosen to be adjacent to the rail trail, one, to provide greater accessibility to that active transportation linkage, but also just naturally how they develop the site and maximizing the number of units that could get on there. They found what was the most appropriate location, which unfortunately is located on a municipal easement. However, or is it within the municipal easement? Yeah, it is. Sorry, it is. However, we will have a requirement that we have agreements and wording within any agreement related to the ability for that to exist within that space in the event we ever needed to access the infrastructure within it. So to that end, I mean, certainly we can work with the developer as part of their development to understand what type of play structure they're putting in and provide those level of details. But it's, the intent would be that they would install and construct it. So typically we don't have as much input as we would if we were taking the design lead. But we can certainly have those discussions to ensure that a play structure that they are looking at is inclusive to the community and meets our community needs.
Might I just ask through you, Chair, one question for follow-up?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Through you, Chair, to Ms. Martin. Ms. Martin, that play structure ultimately would become a municipal infrastructure. I know for other developments, sometimes that's unclear. So in this case, does that play structure ultimately become a municipal asset that we would maintain over time?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, no, it would actually be maintained by, it'd be like they're doing a plan of subdivision as well as a condominium as well. So the common elements would include the play structure. It would be under their care and control.
And through you, Chair, just once again, with that in mind, just having seen the deterioration sometimes of assets that are not municipally owned, right? Because sort of the developer puts them in and then over time, perhaps is less attached to their maintenance and their longevity. Is there a way to build a provision to ensure the maintenance, the safety of that play structure over time?
Certainly, we could look at the provisions within the agreement to see if we could create some sort of easement if the municipality wanted to take over ownership and maintenance of said structure to ensure the longevity of that structure over time. We would review that with the developer as part of the agreement process.
So there may be some flexibility through you, Chair, to Ms. Martin, in terms of ensuring its long-term value, if you will.
Through the Deputy Mayor, that is correct. The province of Ontario, through many of their various legislative changes, my understanding has created some of that flexibility where we have, these types of amenities on private property where the municipality could consider easements to allow for it to take some ownership over it to ensure that it is accessible to the public.
Many thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Peckford. Any other questions? Councillor Wilson, Councillor O'Sullivan? The question's been exhausted. Okay. Ms. Remming is working on new wording. Have you figured it out yet?
If I understood correctly, and I may look to planning staff to confirm, so I've amended it to include a separate section. So the first section that council recommends the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville draft plan conditions for the proposed 50 townhouse unit subdivision located at 210 Van Buren Street as provided in report PD 2024-038, and that a condition of draft approval be included to have a cost-sharing agreement be investigated for the installation of a sidewalk along the northern side of the street. South side of the street, sorry.
Chair, could that language be read again?
Would
Okay,
you'd
sorry,
like
I'll-
that read again? Yes.
Yes, sorry,
Yeah,
through
yes.
you, Deputy Mayor. So to repeat that council recommends the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville draft plan conditions for the proposed 50 townhouse unit subdivision located at 210 Van Buren Street as provided in report PD 2024-038, and that a condition of draft approval be included to have a cost-sharing agreement be investigated for the installation of a sidewalk along the southern side of the street.
Yes, go ahead, Director Martin.
Sorry, may we add, subject to the approval of United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, just given that it is their road, we should ensure that we are consulting with the appropriate road authority when installing potential pedestrian connectivity within the right of way. Yes, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if we should specify it's the south side of Van Buren to connect to the PXO. Just because we want to make sure this sidewalk goes where it
Yes,
should.
my apologies through you, Deputy Mayor. It does include the southern side of the street. And I've added subject to the approval of the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville.
Okay, I'm just wondering if we should specify it's Van Buren, not just the street inside within the subdivision? And that it goes at least to, you know, that it connects to the PXO. Because otherwise they could just put a little sidewalk that maybe doesn't go as far as it should.
Would you like me to read that again, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, please.
That council recommends the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville draft plan conditions for the proposed 50 townhouse unit subdivision located at 210 Van Buren Street as provided in report PD 2024-038, and that a condition of draft approval be included to have a cost-sharing agreement be investigated for the installation of a sidewalk along the southern side of Van Buren Street to connect to the PXO, subject to the approval of the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville.
That sounds like a very complete resolution. You satisfied with that, Councillor Sutherland? Mayor Peckford, does that address your concerns as well?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. My only question back to Ms. Martin is it the municipality of North Grenville who has jurisdiction over sidewalks even on county roads, or do we need county approval? That's not clear to me.
Through the Deputy Mayor, I'm going to direct that question to Director Finley, the Director of Public Works.
Thank you.
Thank you to Madam Mayor. The municipality has the maintenance of the sidewalk. We do, because it is on county property, we do need their approval, but they give us approval and then the maintenance authority after that.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure I was clear on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think that resolution has been sufficiently modified. Do we need to have another reading of it, or is everybody satisfied with what we've heard so far? Okay. Seeing no need to read it again, I'll look for a mover and seconder, please. Councillor O'Sullivan and Councillor Wilson. I don't know if I'm adequately mixing this up. And any further comments to this before we put it to a vote? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is passed. Thank you very much. And the next item is the zoning bylaw amendment 2131 County Road 18. And this is another public meeting, so I will read the statement before me once again. Council will now hold a public meeting to consider an application for lands located on a part of 2131 County Road 18 from rural RU to a site-specific rural RU-71 to permit the establishment of a contractor's yard as an additional permitted use for this property. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If an appellant does not provide oral submissions at this public meeting or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendments, the Ontario Land Tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Any persons who wish further notice of the council's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to the planner following adjournment of this public meeting. Are there people here for this public meeting? Okay, recognizing one. And if you could please state your name and your purpose here, then we will certainly have the rest of this conversation. Do we need to go to the planner first? Pardon me. Sorry, confused the two. We'll hold off on that. So we'll now pass this over to Planner Mohammed Zaid for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I would like to proceed with the presentation with the first slide. Yes, that's the property's location. That's the aerial image of that property where the property has been located. Can we go with the next slide, please? So the property is located at 2131 County Road 18, and the official plan designation of this property and the zoning is rural. The current use of that property is that the single family detached home with attached garage. Can we go with the next slide? So the applicant wants to build a accessory structure, but that height needs to be at least 8 meters. That's the request from them. But according to the zoning requirements, they can only have up to 6 meters because that does not fall into the residential zoning. So that's the main purpose of their application. And the current use of that property is they operate their excavation business on their property. The proposed construction, they are proposing to build a new workshop to support their daily business operations. And the zoning bylaw amendment, they are seeking to rezone our rural exceptions, which is RU71 zone, to include constructors and trades establishment and contractors yard as permitted non-residential uses. Regarding the height exception, the amendment would increase the permit height of the structure from 6 meters to 8.5 meters. In addition, workshop location, it is situated to the east side of a treed area, which will help buffer and mitigate potential impacts on surrounding residential properties. Regarding the access to both the new workshop and the existing residential dwelling will continue via the current driveway. Next slide, please. Policy compliance. The proposed use is suitable for rural lands as per the provincial policy statement. It aligns with the commercial and industrial policies for rural lands in the North Grenville official plan. Next slide, please. As you can see in that side plan, the area which is covered with the red lines, that is the area that the proposing needs to be rezoned from RU to RU71. And it has also shown where the proposed workshop they really want to build. And it also shows where the existing structure has been on the property. And the remaining land will be around 19 acres. In total, they have 25-acre land, and the rest will be rezoned. Next slide, please. Regarding the internal, external, and public comments, no objection has been received from the RVCA or from the bylaw services or from the Emergency and Protective Services Association. Regarding the public input, no comments were received from the public or external agencies at the time of report preparation. Next slide, please. Regarding the conclusion and recommendation, the application meets all requirements upholding the general intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw. The application is consistent with the provincial policy statement. It represents good land use planning and staff recommend approval. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, do let me know.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Zaid, planner. I'm not sure what your title actually is, how I could refer to you, but thank you very much, Mohammed. The committee will now hear from the applicant, followed by members of the public who wish to speak either for or against the proposal. Following any comments from the public, the applicant will be offered an opportunity to respond to questions raised. All persons wishing to address the proposal will ask their questions through the chair. Please state your name and address and postal code prior to addressing the committee. Committee members may also wish to ask questions through the chair to those making presentations. So over to you, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. My name is Chris Clark. I'm with Sanderplan. We're the agents on the file for the applicants. So I just wanted to quickly speak to the proposal itself. Thank you, Mohammed, for the presentation. I think it accurately reflects sort of the variances or the exceptions that we're asking for as part of the zoning. So just in a broader context here, no part of the business was being operated out of the dwelling. And once the proposed workshop was sort of located on the plan, we felt it was better to only rezone part of the property, not to put the entire property into an exception zone that would allow, this use to expand and use other parts of the lot. And the applicants were more than okay with that. Both lots both uses would continue to use the existing driveway, which is located on County Road 18. All the nearby residential uses abutting to the west are fronting to Johnston Road. So we don't anticipate any real changes or impacts on people's access or their enjoyment of their property. In speaking with the applicants, they have spoken to many of the neighbors and let them know that this was coming. So we've done our best to sort of locate things to best buffer from those uses and let people know that this application would be moving forward. In terms of the exceptions, the height, as Mohammed explained, is because this is a non-residential use, which is limited to 6 meters. The workshop will support the business, so a slightly higher height was needed. For the two uses, we added or requested both of those, mainly because we wanted to ensure everything was captured by those two definitions in terms of what's happening on the site. This is sort of a yard that's used for some of the daily operations. There's a staging area there, so that's why contractor's yard was also added. Otherwise, I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. Any questions, any other comments from the public, rather? I don't believe we have anybody here for this. So any comments from council colleagues? Madam Mayor, I see you're still online. Any comments or questions from you?
Thank you for the opportunity, but no, I'm great. Appreciate
Okay,
you
thank
checking in.
much. You never know online. It's always a little bit more challenging. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Clark. There are no questions for you at this time. So I will close the public meeting and table the resolution for the committee to consider. And the resolution is that council approve and enact bylaw 68-24 to rezone the lands at 2131 County Road 18 from rural RU to a specific rural RU 71 to permit the establishment of a contractor's yard as an additional permitted use for the property. Could I get a mover and seconder? Mover by Councillor Wilson and seconded by Councillor O'Sullivan. Any final comments or questions? Seeing none. Pardon me, Madam Mayor, go ahead.
I apologize, Chair. Is there any member of the public in the audience, or was it just our planner?
It is just our planner. There are no
Gotcha.
members of the public.
Indeed. Thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it.
Thank you. With that, I'll put it to a vote. All in favor? Thank you very much. That one passes. And I believe the final item on our agenda is the Asa Street at Prescott Street PXO crossing installation. And Director Finley, I believe that's over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Strachan. So the presentation we have before council's consideration is the Asa Street and Prescott Street pedestrian crossing. Next slide, please. So a bit of background, council did approve under the 2024 budget to formalize a pedestrian crossing at this intersection. Staff has currently moved forward into what options were available. Currently on Prescott, Asa Street is controlled with a stop sign to allow crossing across Asa Street. However, Prescott Street is uncontrolled. Traffic can continue to move, and it's a bit more of a courtesy crosswalk in this area, and there was cause for concern to formalize this crossing. We did review based on ministry standards in terms of selecting the type of crossing, and it did indicate the pedestrian crossing with a type 2 level C, which is a pedestrian crossing with yellow flashing lights to allow for crossing in this area. Next slide, please. The biggest part of this intersection that was being evaluated for the pedestrian crossing was the location of the crossing, north or south of Asa Street. There were some pros and cons between both locations. So staff reviewed this, and where staff is recommending is on the north side of the Asa Street intersection, which currently is not where the crossing is located. There was a number of reasons for this in terms of safety from sightlines. Safety from sightlines was the biggest one, as well as availability of infrastructure to install the actual crossing, putting in these larger poles so that we can put the lights on them and make it more visible for drivers to see. Because of where the bulb outs currently are located on Prescott Street and the trees that are there, moving it back to the south side of the Asa Street intersection would have created some sightline issues, and we didn't want to remove the existing trees, so this provided a bit more availability for that. It also gave us a bit more room to meet the AODA requirements in terms of depressed curbing, so that pedestrians can walk safely, and also avoid the one entrance that is almost adjacent to where the current crosswalk is. Putting infrastructure around that made it a little bit more difficult as well. So that was some of the items that were considered when we were looking at where to put this crossing. Next slide, please. So this photo that you see here gives a bit of a location of where the crossing is. Now you can see it's a bit more in the checker or the boardwalk that's there versus the pavers that are currently installed in the two white lines that are on the south side of Prescott Street. Again, you can see some of the tree lines that are there. So when you have those flashing lights, you want to make sure that vehicles have as much distance to be able to see those to indicate stopping, as well as you can see that entrance between the two buildings kind of to the top of your screen where that intersection would have to be pushed over a little bit to formalize those push buttons, which made it a little bit more difficult to put that in that south side of the intersection. Next slide, please. The biggest part that came with this, with the additional adjustments to the bulb outs and sidewalk work, was that we were over the initial budget that was approved by council. We did see, and council did originally approve $45,000 for this project. However, based on the quotes that were received and the 10% contingency, we are looking to increase the budget to $85,000 to be able to get this project done. And that is the recommendation that we're looking for from council today, is to increase the budget from $45,000 to $85,000, as well as so that we can move forward with this installation. But I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you very much, Director Finlay. It's great to see this change coming about. I know that council has been asking for the change to the courtesy crosswalk that currently exists. I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask before I turn to the rest of council. Right now, there is a brick crossing. Will that be torn up and replaced with asphalt? And then I guess maybe at the same time, you could also answer the new crossing suggestion from, I guess, the other corner from where it is currently situated. Will that be crossing into one of the parking spots? Because I know that there is a bump out and then parking immediately behind that, and I can't quite see from the satellite images where that will be landing on the other side. Thank you.
So thank you for the questions, Deputy Mayor Strachan. to answer the first question, eventually, yes, we will remove the brick crosswalk. The anticipation would be do that next year. We didn't have it in the budget for this project at the moment. We will replace that with asphalt. We in the initial discussion was there may be some confusion in terms of the crosswalk. However, because there's a push button activation for the flashers and you're already on that side of the intersection, it should be pretty intuitive. That's where you're going to walk. You're not going to run across Asa Street and then cross over when the flashers are right there. But we do look to put that into the 2025 budget to remove the brick and pave over that. In terms of your second question, yes, unfortunately, to extend that bulb out to be able, it shortens the distance for the pedestrians to cross, which is a little bit nicer, as well as installation location for the poles and the signs. We will lose that one parking space that is there. It won't eat up the whole space, but it won't be enough for another car to park there. So there will be one space that is lost, unfortunately.
Thank you, Director Finley. Half a spot doesn't help most vehicles, but
No, it
maybe a
doesn't.
smart car. So I guess there's a few of those in town. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? I see Mayor Peckford's hand is up, but Councillor Sutherland, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director Finley, for the report. I'm very happy to see this coming. The Accessibility Advisory Committee, as well as Active Transportation, has been hoping that there would be improvements in the crosswalks on Prescott. So very happy to see this. Thank you. A couple of questions. The proposed pathway that's going to connect from the building at, I believe it's 109 Rubin Street coming out to Prescott Street, where is that going to be in relation to this crosswalk? I'm just curious if you can go back maybe to that overhead slide.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Strachan, I will defer the question to Interim CAO Martin. She knows those plans better than I do for where their location is.
Okay, thanks.
Through your Deputy Mayor to Councillor O'Sullivan, if we could just get the map back up, I might be able to kind of visually speak through it. Yep. Yes, thank you. So when you're looking at the map, so the proposed access from it's 120 Rubin Crescent, which isn't just, it's in behind, you can see the site. It's so the Brewing Oasis building, which I think is just one to the, it's a little further up. So if we go, so you see where the Asa Street intersection is, you've got one driveway, two driveway, it's the third driveway heading south, beside the, I think it's the law office that's there. So that's where, like, the building where Brewing Oasis is that's where they would have that pedestrian connectivity come out from their site out to Prescott Street. That's where they're
Between the one where.
correct. Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. And then the other. Thank you. The other question is with respect to the courtesy crossing side signage, there still is a courtesy crossing further up at the other end of Rubin Street, at the south end of Rubin Street, which we feel that the Active Transportation Committee felt that a courtesy crossing was very misleading and confusing, and some people think it's a crossing and they just sort of waltz across, and cars think it's a stop if I feel like it kind of crossing. And so it's confusing, and it gives kind of a false sense that this is okay to walk across there. So we're wondering if there's a plan, or if what has to happen to get the courtesy crossing sign removed and make it a proper pedestrian crossing.
So through you, Deputy Mayor Strachan, to Councillor O'Sullivan, you are correct. A courtesy crosswalk doesn't have regulatory standing, so it is the cars that have the right of way. And if a vehicle does choose to courtesy stop for the pedestrians. That gives them the access to get across. It can be reviewed for sure to formalize that. Again, there is a ministry standard that we review to ensure what type of crossing is done. We also, the distances between crossings, which I believe it meets the distances on that one, which is why they were set up as courtesies originally. We can look to implement something in the 2025 budget if council so chooses, for sure.
Thank you. So you can't just remove the courtesy sign without, like, it has to go to a budget and has to wait for a year to take the courtesy sign down?
Through Deputy Mayor Strachan to Councillor Sullivan, not to remove it, but if you wanted to formalize crossing on there, then we'd have to look it up. So there would be nothing there at the moment until a new project is reviewed in 2025.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Mayor Peckford, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor Strachan and Chair. Appreciate it. Just in terms of overall traffic volumes and speed on that street, I think we're deeply appreciative to see that as this downtown area develops and evolves and is thriving with the establishment of some newer businesses, that I think this crosswalk will be well embraced. I know that the traffic volumes and the counts were such that obviously the higher need a crosswalk is necessary, and I'm glad to see that our public works staff did that analysis. We've been receiving some other complaints about speed down the street generally, particularly when there's a green light at obviously at the traffic intersection near the post office. And I wondered if larger consideration has been given to other traffic calming measures. We're regularly hearing from a couple of businesses that the speeding after hours, in the evening, some drag racing is happening on Prescott, particularly when there's no imperative to stop when the light at the intersection is not activated, which is often the case later into the day, into the evening. So I just wanted, this is a long way of asking Mr. Finley, through you, Chair, if other considerations based upon the data that was collected could be made about traffic calming on other parts of the street. And I ask that fully recognizing the value of this crosswalk for pedestrian safety, but also recognizing that others have reached out with significant concerns, particularly in the evening, about the speed of traffic.
So through you, Deputy Mayor Strachan, to Madam Mayor, I guess in short, other considerations at this time have not been brought forward. There is some traffic calming measures in terms of the bulb outs in the trees and kind of those offsets that are there. It is something that could be looked at into the future. We would have to, of course, consult with our county counterparts, as they would need the approval of any traffic calming measures that are implemented. So it could be a group undertaking between both parties to see what is possible and what can be done. In terms of the street racing or that kind of item, it is something we can also flag to the OPP. We do find a lot of the traffic calming measures for some of those activities don't seem to deter that. It's more the police presence that can do that as well. So we can ensure that we update them at the same time.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, might I just ask a very quick follow-up question?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So just to Mr. Finley, is the data that was collected on Prescott Street only sort of relevant to the considerations for the PXO, or were the volumes and the speed captured for more of Prescott than what is under consideration for this crosswalk? And again, not in any way diminishing the value of the crosswalk, which I think is very important, but I'm just curious about the data collected. Can it be looked at with that broader lens, or is it very granular and specific to the intersection that we're now discussing for the PXO.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Strachey, and to Madam Mayor, the data that was collected was purely for the PXO. That was the project that was identified by council. So that was the only item that was looked at, is what type of crossing was needed. No further study was done. Again, we can see where the information was collected, and if there's more needed to continue further studies down the main street or Prescott Street.
Okay, thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Director Finley. Any other questions? Any other comments? None? Okay. So we'll look for the resolution, a mover and seconder for the resolution that reads as follows: that council approve the increase in budget for the Type 2 Level C pedestrian crossover project from 45,000 to 85,000. Could I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor O'Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Wilson. I do have one quick follow-up. So the additional cost, is that covered within the general public works budget, or is there additional funding source that's required to cover this?
Thank you for the question. I apologize I didn't answer that during my presentation. Deputy Mayor Strachan. Yes, it is. The extra will be covered through reserves. We went through that with our treasurer, and there's adequate reserves to cover the increase.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Director Finley. So looking for a mover and seconder, we have from Councillor O'Sullivan, Councillor Wilson, and calling to question. All in favor? And that passes as well. Thank you very much. I'm quite excited to see this PXO happen and that change happen. I was there this morning and having to cross over several times, and it was quite tricky. The courtesy crossing is not intuitive, and there are definitely people who think it means more than it does. So it's quite dangerous, and the volume has increased significantly through there. So thank you very much. Looking at the rest of the agenda, so the consent items, the correspondence items rather, are there any other business? I don't believe we have any other business. Any notices of motion? Notice of motions? None. So introduction and consideration of bylaws. I think we're good there. We've got those ones. We can go over there. So the confirmation bylaw, be it resolved that bylaw 70-24 to confirm the proceedings of council at its regular meeting held on August 14th, 2024, be adopted and passed. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor O'Sullivan. And all in favor? That's good. Carried. Thank you. And the final item of the evening is a resolution to adjourn. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of council adjourn at 8:15 p.m. Moved by Councillor Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Wilson. And all in favor, of course. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for joining us and for entertaining me in this